I'm holding a document that shouldn't exist, a document that was probably supposed to be destroyed, that German commanders would have preferred never be written at all. This is a Luftwaffe security investigation report. November 6, 1944. Airfield designation classified. Location: Czechoslovakia, approximately 200 kilometers behind the front lines. Subject: theft of military aircraft. 1 Focke-Wulf Fw 190A8. Serial number obscured in the report, probably deliberately. Status: aircraft missing, pilot unknown, presumed enemy action. This report documents one of the most embarrassing security failures in Luftwaffe history. An American pilot, shot down 4 days earlier, walked onto a German airfield at 3 a.m., climbed into a fully fueled fighter aircraft, figured out controls labeled entirely in German, and flew 200 miles back to Allied lines. While German guards slept, the investigation would end careers, destroy reputations, reveal just how far the Luftwaffe had fallen by late 1944. And it started on a cold November morning when 2 mechanics arrived for work and discovered their aircraft was gone. November 6, 1944. 6:47 a.m. German airfield, Czechoslovakia. Obergefreiter Hans Weber walked across the frozen grass toward Revetment 7. His breath formed clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. November in Central Europe. Temperature just below freezing. The kind of cold that makes metal brittle and engines reluctant to start. Weber was a mechanic, 23 years old, from Stuttgart. He'd been working on aircraft since 1941. 3 years of patching bullet holes, replacing damaged engines, keeping fighters flying despite shortages of parts, fuel, everything. This morning he was supposed to perform a final inspection on Focke-Wulf Fw 190A8, tactical number Black 12. The aircraft had undergone maintenance the previous day. New spark plugs, oil change, general servicing. Weber and his partner Unteroffizier Carl Schmidt had worked on it until 8 p.m. the night before. They'd left it ready for a test flight scheduled for 7:30 a.m. The pilot would take it up, run through basic maneuvers, verify everything worked properly, then return it to operational status. Standard procedure. Weber had done this hundreds of times. He reached Revetment 7 and stopped. The camouflage netting was disturbed, pulled aside, not removed properly but pushed away like someone had been in a hurry. Weber felt the first flutter of concern. He pulled the netting back completely. The revetment was empty. No aircraft, no Fw 190, just frozen mud and tire tracks leading toward the taxiway. For a moment, Weber's brain refused to process what he was seeing. He'd left the Fw 190 here, right here, 12 hours ago, fully fueled, cockpit covered, everything secured. Now it was gone. He turned and ran toward the operations building, 70 meters across open ground, his boots slipping on frost-covered grass, his mind racing through possibilities. Someone moved it overnight. A pilot took it up early. There's an explanation. There has to be an explanation. Schmidt met him at the operations door. Hans, what's wrong? Black 12. It's gone. The Fw 190 is gone. What do you mean gone? I mean it's not in the revetment. Someone took it. Schmidt's face went pale. They'd been responsible for that aircraft. If something happened to it, if someone stole it, if... They found the duty officer, Feldwebel Otto Braun, in the operations room. He was filling out paperwork. Night shift. The worst duty. 12 hours of watching an airfield where nothing ever happened. Feldwebel, we have a problem, Weber said. The Fw 190 in Revetment 7. It's missing. Braun looked up. Missing. Gone. Not there. We left it secured last night. Now it's empty. Braun stood. You're certain? Yes, Feldwebel. Completely certain. They walked to Revetment 7 together. The empty space confirmed what Weber had said. No aircraft, just tire tracks in the mud leading toward the taxiway, then disappearing. Braun felt his stomach drop. This was his shift, his responsibility. An aircraft had disappeared on his watch. He was supposed to maintain security, supposed to ensure nothing like this could happen. "When did you last see the aircraft?" Braun asked. 8 p.m. yesterday. Schmidt and I finished maintenance. We secured the cockpit, covered everything, left it ready for this morning's test flight. "And no one authorized moving it overnight?" "No, Focke-Wulf. The test flight was scheduled for 7:30 this morning." Braun looked at the tire tracks. They led east, toward the taxiway, toward the runway. Someone had rolled this aircraft out of the revetment, taxied it, and— "Check the field," Braun ordered. "Every revetment, every hangar. Maybe someone moved it." They searched. Every aircraft on the field was accounted for, except Black 12. At 7:15 a.m., Braun made the call he'd been dreading. He picked up the field telephone and dialed Operations Command. "This is Focke-Wulf Brown, night duty officer. I need to report an incident. One of our aircraft is missing. FW-190A8, Black 12. Last confirmed position, revetment 7 as of 2000 hours yesterday. Current status unknown. Presumed stolen." The word felt impossible saying out loud. Stolen. Someone had stolen a Luftwaffe fighter aircraft from an active military airfield. The response was immediate. "Stand by. Do not leave your post. Command is dispatching an investigation team." Braun hung up, looked at Weber and Schmidt. Both mechanics looked terrified. They should be. This was career-ending, possibly court-martial territory. "Who was on guard duty last night?" Weber asked quietly. Braun didn't answer immediately, because the answer was damning. Sector 7 guard post, Gefreiter Oskar Lehmann. He was supposed to patrol the eastern revetments every 2 hours. Did he? According to the log, yes. Last entry 0200 hours. All clear. Then how did someone steal an aircraft 2 hours later? That was the question that would destroy careers, the question that would reveal just how badly German security had deteriorated by November 1944. How does an enemy pilot walk onto a Luftwaffe airfield, steal a fighter aircraft, and fly away without anyone noticing? The answer, when they discovered it, would be worse than anyone imagined. November 6, 1944, 9:30 a.m., Airfield Commandant's Office. Major Heinrich Vogel arrived from Sector Command at 8:45 a.m. He was responsible for security across 6 airfields in the region. Vogel was a career Luftwaffe officer, 38 years old, experienced, professional, and absolutely furious. He stood in front of Gefreiter Oskar Lehmann, the guard who'd been on duty in Sector 7, the sector that included Revetment 7, the revetment where a fully fueled FW-190 had been stolen sometime between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. "Walk me through your patrol," Vogel said. His voice was cold, controlled, dangerous. Lehmann was 19 years old, conscripted 8 months earlier, basic training, then assigned to airfield security duty. The kind of assignment that seemed safe, easy, stand guard, walk patrols. Nothing ever happens at airfields 200 kilometers behind the front lines. "I completed my 2 a.m. patrol as scheduled, Herr Major. I checked all revetments in Sector 7. Everything was secure. I logged it in the duty book." "And after 2 a.m.? Lehmann hesitated, just for a second, but Vogel saw it. "After 2 a.m., Gefreiter? I returned to the guard post." "Which is where exactly?" "Eastern perimeter, near the fuel depot." "And from there, can you see Revetment 7? Another hesitation. "No, Herr Major. The hangars block the view." "So after 2 a.m. you had no visual on the eastern revetments?" "No, Herr Major." "And your next scheduled patrol was when?" 4 a.m. "Did you complete the 4 a.m. patrol?" Silence. "Gefreiter Lehmann, did you complete your 4 a.m. patrol?" I must have fallen asleep, Herr Major." The room went very quiet. Weber and Schmidt, standing against the wall, exchanged glances. Focke-Wulf Brown, the night duty officer, closed his eyes. Vogel's voice remained perfectly calm. "You fell asleep." "Yes, Herr Major. I was very tired. I had been on duty since you fell asleep, and during that time someone walked onto this airfield, crossed approximately 80 meters of open ground, climbed into a Focke-Wulf 190, started the engine, taxied to the runway, and took off. And you heard nothing? The guard post is quite far from. A BMW 801 radial engine produces 1,700 horsepower, Gefreiter. At idle it sounds like thunder. You're telling me you slept through that? Lehman said nothing. There was nothing to say. He'd been asleep. An aircraft had been stolen. His career was over. Possibly worse than over, depending on how angry command decided to be about this. Vogel turned to Braun. And you, Feldwebel, you were duty officer. What were you doing between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m.? I was in operations, Herr Major, monitoring radio traffic, completing paperwork. Did you hear an aircraft engine start? No, Herr Major. The operations building is 200 meters from Revetment 7. How did you not hear a fighter aircraft start up and take off? Braun had no answer. Because the truth was simple and damning, he hadn't been paying attention. Night duty was boring. Nothing ever happened. He'd been half asleep himself, going through the motions, counting down the hours until his shift ended. And during those hours, someone had stolen an aircraft. Vogel picked up a piece of paper from the desk. I've been on the telephone with intelligence. They have some information. On November 2nd, 4 days ago, an American P-51 Mustang was shot down approximately 40 kilometers from this location. The pilot bailed out. We assumed he was either dead or captured. He was neither. He looked at each man in turn. The pilot's name is Lieutenant Bruce Carr, American, 354th Fighter Group. He's been evading capture for 4 days. Apparently, instead of moving toward Allied lines, he came here, to this airfield. He watched you. Weber felt sick. He watched us. Intelligence believes he observed the airfield for at least 24 hours before the theft. He saw mechanics, you two, working on that FW-190. He saw you fuel it, saw you run the engine, saw you leave it ready for a test flight, and then he waited for darkness and took it. Schmidt's voice was barely a whisper. How did he know how to fly it? He's a pilot, Unteroffizier. A very good one, apparently. 7 confirmed kills before he was shot down. He looked at German controls and figured them out, because we made it easy for him. We left a fully fueled aircraft sitting unguarded with the cockpit unlocked. Vogel set down the paper. This American pilot stole one of our aircraft, flew it 200 kilometers through German airspace, and landed it at an Allied airfield in France. He delivered a complete, functional FW-190A8 directly to Allied intelligence. They now have access to every technical specification, every vulnerability, every advantage that aircraft provided. The room was silent. Do you understand what this means? Vogel continued. Every FW-190 pilot in the Luftwaffe is now at greater risk because Allied pilots will know exactly how to fight this aircraft. They'll know its weaknesses, its blind spots, its performance limitations, because we gave them a perfect example to study. He looked at Lehman. You're confined to quarters pending court-martial proceedings. Charge, dereliction of duty. Then to Braun. You're relieved of duty. Report to Sector Command for reassignment. Then to Weber and Schmidt. You two are being transferred. I don't know where yet. Somewhere you can't do any more damage. Vogel walked to the window. Outside, the airfield continued its operations. Aircraft taking off, landing, taxiing, everything normal. Except nothing was normal, because everyone on this base now knew a Luftwaffe airfield had been penetrated, an aircraft stolen. Security had failed completely. Write your reports, Vogel said without turning around. Every detail, what you saw, what you did, what you failed to do. This will be investigated thoroughly, and when command decides who's responsible, punishments will be severe. He paused. Dismissed. The men filed out. Vogel remained at the window. thinking about a 21-year-old American pilot who'd somehow turned a catastrophic failure into an intelligence coup, who'd been shot down behind enemy lines and, instead of running, had walked directly into a German airfield and stolen one of their aircraft. Bold, insane, brilliant, and absolutely humiliating for the Luftwaffe. November 7, 1944, intelligence briefing, Luftwaffe Sector Command. Hauptmann Ernst Becker spread reconnaissance photographs across the table. He was Luftwaffe intelligence. His job was understanding how enemies operated, how they thought, how they exploited weaknesses. This case was different. This wasn't analyzing enemy tactics from a distance. This was reconstructing exactly how one American pilot had made the Luftwaffe look like amateurs. "We've pieced together the timeline," Becker said. Major Vogel sat across from him, along with 3 other officers from neighboring airfields. This briefing wasn't just about one stolen aircraft. This was about preventing it from happening again. Becker pointed to the first photograph. November 2nd, 1544 hours, American P-51 Mustang shot down here. He indicated a location 40 kilometers northwest. Pilot bails out. Lieutenant Bruce Carr, age 21, 354th Fighter Group, 7 confirmed aerial victories. "Young," one officer commented. "Young and resourceful," Becker corrected. "He lands in German-occupied territory. Standard procedure would be to move west toward Allied lines. He didn't. He moved east, toward the airfield." Becker pulled out a hand-drawn map. "We found his parachute buried approximately here, 2 kilometers from the airfield perimeter. Based on debris patterns and ground disturbance, we believe he spent November 5th observing the airfield from the tree line." "All day?" Vogel asked. "Most of it. We found evidence of a concealed position, compressed vegetation, signs of prolonged occupancy. He had a clear view of the eastern revetments, including Revetment 7. Becker placed another document on the table. A photograph, grainy but clear enough. This was taken by French resistance and passed to Allied intelligence, then intercepted by our signals unit. It shows the stolen FW-190 at an American airfield in France. Notice the landing gear." Vogel leaned forward. "It's retracted. He belly landed it. The American pilot couldn't figure out how to extend the landing gear. He flew 200 kilometers and performed a wheels-up landing rather than bail out." "Insane," someone muttered. "Effective," Becker countered. "The aircraft sustained minimal damage. Propeller destroyed, some structural damage to the fuselage, but the engine intact, weapons intact, avionics intact. Allied intelligence now has a complete FW-190A8 to examine." He continued. "Based on guard logs and witness accounts, we've reconstructed his actions the night of November 5th. Obergefreiter Weber and Unteroffizier Schmidt completed maintenance on Black 12 at approximately 2,000 hours. They fueled the aircraft, ran the engine, verified all systems, then secured the cockpit with standard canvas cover." "Not locked?" an officer asked. "Canvas cover, not locked. Standard procedure for aircraft awaiting test flights." Vogel closed his eyes. Standard procedure. The procedure that assumed no enemy could penetrate 200 kilometers behind German lines, observe a Luftwaffe airfield, and steal an aircraft. Becker continued. At 0200 hours, Gefreiter Lehmann completed his patrol. Everything appeared normal. He returned to the guard post and fell asleep. Between 0245 and 0315 hours, we've narrowed the window based on when guards in adjacent sectors would have heard the engine. Carr crossed 80 meters of open ground, removed the canvas cover, climbed into the cockpit, and attempted to start the aircraft. Attempted. The FW-190 uses an inertia starter. You wind a flywheel manually, then engage it. It's not intuitive for someone unfamiliar with the system. Based on American debriefs, yes, we have sources. Carr spent approximately 10 minutes figuring out the starting procedure. He did this by trial and error, in the dark, in a German aircraft, with German labels. The room was silent. At approximately 0300 hours, the engine started. By the time anyone responded, Carr was already taxiing. Feldwebel Braun saw the aircraft moving but assumed it was a German pilot. By the time he realized something was wrong, the FW-190 was airborne. Becker placed a final document on the table. This is the American after-action report, declassified deliberately, we suspect, to embarrass us. Lieutenant Carr reported that he flew at treetop level for 45 minutes to avoid radar. He was shot at repeatedly by our flak batteries, but sustained no serious damage. When he reached Allied territory, he was shot at by American anti-aircraft guns who assumed he was German. He survived that too. And then he belly-landed the aircraft at his home airfield, climbed out, and became an instant hero. The Americans are calling him the pilot who stole a German fighter. There are photographs in American newspapers. The story is spreading through Allied forces. It's a propaganda victory. Vogel spoke quietly. And a catastrophic failure for us. Yes, Herr Major. It demonstrates several critical weaknesses. First, our airfield security is inadequate. 1 guard per sector is insufficient. Second, our aircraft are left too accessible. Unlocked cockpits on fueled aircraft. Third, our guards are exhausted and undisciplined. Lehman fell asleep on duty because he'd been working 12-hour shifts for weeks. Those are his excuses, Vogel said coldly. They're explanations, not excuses, Becker replied. We're losing this war, gentlemen. We don't have enough men, don't have enough resources, don't have enough of anything. So we cut corners. We leave aircraft unguarded. We assign 1 man to patrol areas that need 3. We work our people until they collapse, and then we act surprised when an enemy pilot exploits those weaknesses. He gathered the documents. New security protocols are being drafted. All aircraft must be locked. Fuel tanks drained unless aircraft are mission ready. Guards increased. Patrols doubled. But understand this. These measures come too late. The damage is done. Bruce Carr proved that Luftwaffe airfields are vulnerable. Other Allied pilots will try this now, and we may not be lucky enough to stop them. Vogel stood. Distribute the protocols immediately. Every airfield in the sector. I want daily security audits, random inspections. Anyone found sleeping on duty will be court-martialed without exception. The officers filed out. Becker remained behind, organizing his papers. Vogel approached him. Do you believe this will happen again? Vogel asked quietly. Becker looked up. Honestly? I'm surprised it hasn't happened more often already. We're stretched too thin, trying to defend too much territory with too few resources. Bruce Carr was bold, yes, but he was also lucky. Lucky that Lehman fell asleep. Lucky that Braun wasn't paying attention. Lucky that the FW-190 started on the first try. Luck favors the prepared, Vogel said, and it punishes the complacent. We've been complacent, Herr Major. November 1944. The Allies are advancing on all fronts. We're losing. And stories like this, stories about American pilots stealing our aircraft, they don't help morale. Vogel said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Becker was right. Germany was losing. And every failure, every embarrassment, every stolen aircraft made that loss feel more inevitable. Somewhere in France, Bruce Carr was probably laughing, telling the story to his squadron mates. How he stole a German fighter right off a Luftwaffe airfield. And somewhere in Germany, Gefreiter Oskar Lehmann was awaiting court-martial. Both men would remember November 5, 1944, for very different reasons. November 15, 1944. Military Courthouse, Prague. Gefreiter Oskar Lehmann stood at attention, 19 years old, uniform pressed, hands shaking slightly. The court-martial had taken 20 minutes. The verdict was predetermined. Gefreiter Lehmann, you are found guilty of dereliction of duty. You fell asleep at your post, resulting in the theft of military property valued at 100,000 Reichsmarks and the compromise of classified technical information to the enemy. The judge, A Luftwaffe colonel Lehmann didn't recognize, continued reading the sentence. You are hereby stripped of rank. You are sentenced to 6 months military prison. Sentence suspended. You will be transferred to infantry duty on the Eastern Front, effective immediately. The Eastern Front, November 1944. The Red Army was advancing through Poland. German forces were in full retreat. Infantry units were being ground into dust. Life expectancy for a frontline soldier was measured in weeks. Lehmann's transfer wasn't just punishment, it was a death sentence dressed up as military reassignment. He saluted, was dismissed, walked out of the courthouse knowing he'd probably never see Germany again. All because he'd fallen asleep. November 18, 1944. Feldwebel Otto Braun's new assignment. Braun was luckier. No court-martial, just reassignment. From comfortable airfield duty officer to supply depot manager in eastern Germany. A significant demotion without the official paperwork. He spent his days counting ammunition boxes, tracking fuel deliveries, filing reports, the kind of tedious, meaningless work that kept him far from anything important. He'd been duty officer at an active airfield, responsible for operations, security, coordination. Now he counted boxes. His commanding officer had made it clear, "You're not being punished officially, Feldwebel, but you are being removed from any position where your incompetence can cause further damage. If you'd been paying attention that night, if you'd heard the engine start, if you'd responded immediately, we might have stopped the theft. You didn't. So here you are, counting boxes, for the rest of the war." Every night Braun thought about that sound he should have heard. The BMW 801 engine starting up, 1700 horsepower. It must have been loud, must have echoed across the airfield. He'd been 200 meters away, and he'd heard nothing, because he'd been half asleep, because he'd been bored, because night duty on a quiet airfield felt like the safest assignment in the entire Wehrmacht. Until it wasn't. November 20th, 1944. Obergefreiter Hans Weber and Unteroffizier Karl Schmidt. The two mechanics were transferred together. North Africa. A Luftwaffe maintenance depot in Tunisia, supporting what was left of German forces in the Mediterranean. It wasn't quite the Eastern Front, but it was close. North Africa was collapsing. Allied forces controlled most of the region. German units were being evacuated or destroyed. The maintenance depot existed to keep a handful of aircraft flying for a few more weeks before the inevitable surrender. Weber and Schmidt worked 12-hour days repairing aircraft that would probably be destroyed within a week. They never spoke about what had happened in Czechoslovakia, never mentioned Black 12, never discussed how their mistake, leaving a fully fueled aircraft unsecured, had contributed to one of the Luftwaffe's most embarrassing incidents. But they thought about it. Every day, every aircraft they worked on, they made certain it was locked, secured, guarded. Because they'd learned the hard way, in war, there are no small mistakes, only catastrophic ones. November 25, 1944. Wright Field, Ohio. Allied Technical Intelligence. The stolen FW-190 sat in a hangar surrounded by American engineers. They'd transported it from France to the United States for detailed analysis. This was intelligence gold, a complete functional example of Germany's premier fighter aircraft. Captain James Morrison, Army Air Force's Technical Intelligence, walked around the aircraft taking notes. Focke-Wulf 190A8, BMW 801 D2 radial engine, 1,700 horsepower, maximum speed 408 miles per hour at 20,600 feet. Service ceiling 3,400 feet. Range 560 miles. He opened the cockpit. Controls are logical once you understand the layout. Throttle left side, stick right side. Rudder pedals standard. The complexity is in the engine management. Fuel mixture, propeller pitch, supercharger settings. All manual. Requires significant pilot skill. An engineer asked, "How did Lieutenant Carr figure this out in the dark?" Morrison smiled. "He's a pilot, a good one. You give a pilot a throttle, a stick, and pedals, and he'll figure out how to make it fly. Everything else is just details. They spent 3 weeks testing the Fw-190, pushing it to its limits, documenting every performance characteristic, every vulnerability, every advantage. The results were classified and distributed to every fighter squadron in Europe. Fw-190 blind spots directly astern below the tail. Pilot visibility is limited by the radial engine cowling. Exploit this during pursuit. Fw-190 weaknesses: poor high-altitude performance above 25,000 feet. The BMW 801 loses power at altitude. American P-51s and P-47s have advantage. Fw-190 strengths: exceptional roll rate, superior firepower with 4 20mm cannons, heavily armored, difficult to destroy with frontal attacks. American fighter pilots studied the reports, learned the aircraft's characteristics, used that knowledge to gain advantages in combat. German Fw-190 pilots began dying at higher rates, not because they'd become worse pilots, but because their enemies now understood their aircraft perfectly. All because Bruce Carr had stolen one Fw-190 and delivered it intact to Allied intelligence. December 10, 1944. Luftwaffe assessment. This is the final report on the incident, filed by Luftwaffe intelligence 6 weeks after the theft. Assessment. The theft of Fw-190A8 on November 6, 1944 represents a significant intelligence failure. Allied forces have gained complete technical knowledge of our primary fighter aircraft. Consequences include: 1. Increased Allied effectiveness in air combat. Enemy pilots now exploit known weaknesses. 2. Propaganda value. The story of an American pilot stealing a German fighter has spread through Allied forces. Morale impact is negative for Luftwaffe personnel. 3. Security failures exposed. Recommendations for improved protocols have been issued to all airfields. Implementation is mandatory. 4. Personnel actions taken. Guards, duty officers, and maintenance personnel responsible for the failure have been reassigned or disciplined. Conclusion: this incident was preventable. It occurred due to inadequate security, exhausted personnel, and complacency regarding enemy capabilities. It must not happen again. But it did happen, and the cost was higher than one aircraft. The cost was reputation, confidence, the belief that German airfields were secure. Bruce Carr didn't just steal an airplane, he stole something more valuable: the illusion that Germany was still in control. By December 1944, everyone knew the truth. Germany was losing, and stories like this proved it. January 1945. The lessons that came too late. The new security protocols were implemented across every Luftwaffe airfield in Germany and occupied territories. Guards doubled, patrols increased, all aircraft cockpits locked, fuel tanks drained unless aircraft were mission-ready within 24 hours. It was comprehensive, thorough, exactly what should have been in place before November 1944. But it was also meaningless. By January 1945, the Luftwaffe was running out of everything: fuel, pilots, aircraft, time. The new security protocols protected aircraft that couldn't fly because there was no fuel. Guards watched over empty airfields because all the fighters were destroyed or grounded. The stolen Fw-190 became a story told in quiet corners. A cautionary tale. Some Luftwaffe personnel found it darkly amusing. An American pilot, shot down and alone, had walked onto a German airfield and stolen a fighter. It was so absurd it was almost funny. Others found it humiliating, a symbol of how far they'd fallen. The Luftwaffe that had dominated European skies in 1940 couldn't even guard its own aircraft in 1944. But most found it simply exhausting. One more failure in a war full of failures. One more embarrassment in a long series of embarrassments. Major Heinrich Vogel, the officer who'd investigated the theft, wrote in his personal diary, discovered decades later in East German archives, The FW-190 theft revealed what we already knew but refused to admit. We are losing not because our pilots lack courage, not because our aircraft are inferior. We are losing because we are exhausted, spread too thin, defending too much territory with too few resources. One American pilot exploited this. Others will follow, and we lack the strength to stop them. He was right. 2 months after the FW-190 theft, Germany surrendered. The war ended not with dramatic final battles but with collapse. Armies disintegrating, supply lines failing, airfields abandoned. The FW-190 that Bruce Carr stole remained at Wright Field until 1947. Then it was transferred to the Smithsonian Institution, later to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Today, it sits in a climate-controlled hangar in Ohio, restored, preserved, a trophy of American ingenuity and German failure. Placard text reads, "This Focke-Wulf Fw-190A8 was captured in November 1944 when Lieutenant Bruce Carr of the 354th Fighter Group stole it from a German airfield after being shot down. He flew it 200 miles back to Allied lines, providing invaluable technical intelligence." Invaluable. That's the word. Because that one aircraft, stolen in a moment of German carelessness, provided information that helped Allied pilots kill German pilots more efficiently. Present day, the archive, final reflections. This story isn't about Bruce Carr. The Americans have told his story many times. The hero pilot, the daring escape, the impossible theft. This is about the Germans who made it possible. Gefreiter Lehmann, who fell asleep because he'd been working 12-hour shifts for weeks. Feldwebel Braun, who wasn't paying attention because nothing ever happened on night duty. Obergefreiter Weber and Unteroffizier Schmidt, who left an aircraft fueled and unlocked because that was standard procedure. Major Vogel, who had to explain to his superiors how an enemy pilot penetrated a Luftwaffe airfield and stole a fighter aircraft. None of them were incompetent, none were traitors. They were exhausted men trying to fight a war Germany was losing, and in that exhaustion, mistakes happened. Small mistakes that became catastrophic failures. The theft of one FW-190 didn't change the outcome of World War II. Germany was already losing, but it symbolized something important. By late 1944, Germany couldn't even protect its own aircraft, couldn't maintain basic security, couldn't prevent an enemy pilot from walking onto an airfield and stealing a fighter. That's not a story about American courage. It's a story about German collapse. Bruce Carr was bold, resourceful, lucky, but he succeeded because the German military machine that had conquered most of Europe in 2 years was, by November 1944, falling apart. Guards falling asleep, officers not paying attention, protocols not followed, resources stretched to breaking. One American pilot exploited those weaknesses and became a hero. But the real story is the weakness itself. The moment when the Luftwaffe realized it couldn't even guard its own aircraft anymore. When security failures weren't aberrations but symptoms of a larger collapse. The FW-190 theft is remembered in Germany, when it's remembered at all, as an embarrassment, a footnote, a story that most would prefer to forget. But it deserves to be remembered, because it shows what happens when exhaustion meets war, when men are pushed beyond their limits, when systems fail not because people are incompetent, but because they're human. Gefreiter Lehmann fell asleep and an aircraft was stolen. But the real failure wasn't Lehmann's. It was the system that worked him until exhaustion, that posted one guard where 3 were needed, that cut corners because resources were scarce. That's the lesson of November 1944. Not that American pilots were bold, but that German defenses were crumbling. One theft, one aircraft, one moment of exhaustion that cost careers, reputation, and lives. Wars aren't won by heroic individuals. They're won by systems, resources, logistics, the ability to maintain discipline when exhausted, to follow procedures when bored, to stay alert when nothing happens. Germany lost all of that by late 1944, and Bruce Carr proved it by walking onto a German airfield and flying away in a German fighter. The Americans celebrate him. The Germans prefer to forget. But both sides learned the same lesson. In war, there are no small mistakes, only catastrophic ones. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Every single like tells the algorithm that these forgotten stories, even the embarrassing ones, deserve to be remembered. That history isn't just about heroes and victories, but about failures and lessons learned. We dedicate ourselves to rescuing these stories from the archives. German perspectives, Allied perspectives, the complete picture. If you want to join us in this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We're bringing these stories back to life every week. Real documents, real people, real history. Where are you watching from? Write in the comments your city or country. Tell us if anyone in your family served in the Luftwaffe or in any air force during World War II. These stories connect all of us, German, American, British, Russian, because they're about humans under impossible pressure. Thank you for ensuring that Gefreiter Oskar Lehmann, Feldwebel Otto Braun, Obergefreiter Hans Weber, Unteroffizier Karl Schmidt, and the thousands of exhausted German soldiers who fought a losing war are not forgotten in silence. They weren't villains. They were men doing impossible jobs with insufficient resources. And when they failed, the consequences were catastrophic. That's war. Not glory, not heroism, just exhaustion, failure, and the weight of impossible expectations. Bruce Carr stole a FW-190 and became a legend. But the real story is the men who let it happen, not because they were incompetent, but because they were human. And in war, being human is often not enough.